When I was 5 years old, I was playing in my room when my mother came in and told me and two of my elder siblings that we may go swimming. She stated it was hot and not to bother about waiting on her, to just go ahead and do it. My brother John and I changed fast and were rushing down the hill to the pond in an instant. John dashed ahead of me and dove into the pond at the farthest end from our house. As I was going into the wading, he was already doing laps to the middle and back. I could only paddle like a dog. We'd never been permitted to swim by ourselves before. There was a sensation of wild freedom since we knew Dad would never have allowed this if he were home. I was careful not to go over my head as I dog paddled close to the bank, until I observed a piece of wood floating. I sat on it to check whether it might be used as a raft. Yes, it did. I used it to get to the pond's center. When I got to the center, I told John, "Look at me." John swam out to where I was, snatched the board from me, and climbed on it, taking off towards the bank and continued his laps. I sank as I struggled to keep my head above water, understanding I should never have gone out there without first learning to float or tread water. My eyes were just a few seconds above the water before I was sinking deep into it, kicking and screaming, tumbling and gulping. It was an awful feeling to know you were somewhere where no one could see you, hear you, or even notice you needed assistance. The water was a dark color. I couldn't tell which way was up or which way was down anymore. I was concerned that I was kicking in the wrong way. I needed to pause and reflect for a moment. My throat stung so much that yelling underwater made it worse. I wanted to cry, but I had to think first. Then I realized it wasn't hurting anymore. I wasn't kicking, screamed, or sobbed. I thought to myself, I'm fine. My parents had to have lied to me, I reasoned. They always warned, don't go too far out or you'll drown. I didn't feel like I'd drowned. I couldn't wait to inform my 4 older siblings that you don't drown and that we too can breathe underwater. The dark brown murky water has turned a light, bright, translucent green. I was overjoyed and ecstatic, as if I had discovered something no one had ever done before. I felt like I was sinking deeper into the water, and I thought it amusing that the fish were bumping into me and prodding me. I was enthralled as I watched them swim, watching their fins, tails, and lips open and reopen, wiggling in front of me. Then I got puzzled as to why everything had changed. When Dad brought us fishing, we tried to capture a fish with our hands, but they were too fast. They were terrified of us. Why weren't they there now? At home, I remembered the plastic treasure chest in our gold fish bowl. I had a feeling I was now an item like that. I realized I was no longer alive. I imagined myself as a dead girl at the bottom of the pond for the rest of my life. People would look for me, but they'd never find me all the way down here. I was in the pond's deepest area. Families would come and swim, horrified that a dead girl was somewhere down here. My family would constantly be aware that I was down here. I didn't want to spoil things for everyone else. As time passes, more recollections of my thoughts resurface. I just blurted out the fundamentals at first, terrified of what I was saying. I just wanted to get it out of the way. Many years later, I relaxed and allowed myself to simply go with the memories, not being afraid of any of them. Some could call it embellishment. It is not the case. The memories are simply unfolding as I learn to accept and comprehend them. I used to skip over sections since I couldn't articulate or understand things to myself. Then I noticed my vision brightening. It was as if I was simply my eyes. My eyes stayed at the surface of the water for a moment as I realized my vision had changed. I could see both beneath and above the sea, 2 perspectives at the same time. I decided I was sick of under. I'd been looking at fish for a long time, and there wasn't much else to see down there. It was more interesting above water. It had been a beautiful summer day. There was bright sunshine, lush green foliage, and a clear blue sky. I rose a bit above the water, knowing it was stupid, but I was still terrified of heights. I intended to take it slowly at first, and then come to a halt when I became nervous. I reached treetop height and decided that was enough for the time being. The view will live with me forever. Above the pond, above the road, above the river, and up the hill stood our house, and I could see the train tracks further down the tracks than I could from the ground. It felt cool to be at the treetops. Then I noticed my family. My mother and sister Terry had come at the pond at some time, I saw. They were sunbathing on a bed sheet at the pond's edge. They were sitting, spreading lotion on their arms and legs and talking while looking at their skin and each other. They hadn't even realized I'd left. I was furious that they should have been looking at me. I sensed the tight femaleness of their talk and knew it was too old for me. Terry's ability to communicate with Mom made me envious. I'll never do that again. Then I looked down at the other end of the pond and saw John on my board. I was furious and blamed him for my death. John didn't need that board, but I would have perished if I didn't have it. I got information at that moment that I had never known before but could never deny again, and which has become more true as time has passed. My relatives did not care about me. That wrath swept in like a fierce wind and vanished with acceptance like the breeze. I was perfectly fine. I could now see the advantages of dying. I no longer had to listen to my parents. I can go wherever I want without fear of getting in trouble. I reasoned that because I could hover over a pond, I could fly. I reasoned that I might as well do what the ghost did. As I walked in, I pictured a bunch of elderly people sitting around a table in the kitchen of an abandoned house somewhere, all turning to look at me. At first I thought of ghosts and dead people as old, but then I realized that kids die too. I guess I'll go look for some ghost kids to play with. I imagined myself as Peter Pan, flying around with them. I immediately adapted and looked forward to the freedom and adventure of not having a body. I was relieved to be rid of that family. They didn't love me, which was wrong. That's not how it's intended to be. At that time, I was struck by a tremendous sense of justice, right and wrong. I was about to take off when I heard a female voice warn me to wait, that I shouldn't go yet. Why not? I reasoned. She said I could go back if they found me fast. I contended that they hadn't even noticed I'd drowned. I couldn't see my own body. It was deep down underwater, perhaps in the middle of the pond. How could they have found me in that huge pond with all that deep water? I was told to be patient. I was planning on staying for a few minutes, but I'm leaving now. Then I have some hazy memories of stuff I'm not sure about, like walking down the highway with 3 boys carrying fishing poles who kept ignoring me. I could hear everything people were thinking, being eye level with a billboard as you approach town, bouncing around with kids in a yard in town, and going inside houses to see what they looked like, across from my grandma's house. I'm not sure if these are real, yet they never fade. I simply feel foolish bringing them up. My clear memory runs from hearing the angel urge me to wait, don't go yet, I might go back, to waking up, hanging over John's right shoulder, staring down at the gray pavement of the road, and pond water flowing out of my mouth and down John's back. Can I put her down now? John asks Mom. I can see Mom and Terry up ahead, going towards home, almost to the railroad tracks, from where I'm hanging upside down. They both turn to look back at the same time, and they notice that my dead body had sprung to life. Mom sighs and grips her chest, nods her head yes to answer John's query, and she and Terry continue going home. They're saying something in hushed tones. It appears that they intend to keep this a secret from my father. Mom does not want to get into any sort of difficulty. John abandons me on the side of the road and chases after them. I'm standing there sick, with a stomach full of pond water, now confronted with the fact that my family doesn't love me, and knowing it's not fair. I literally resemble a drowned rat. I'm not happy to be here. I'd like to return there. This used to be the end of my memory, then I started to recall something else. I honestly pondered going back, strolling to the pond, and going back in while I stood there before returning back home. I was going to take off. I was going to have a good time. I was shown a new way of life. I didn't want the old one anymore. An angel emerged above the road, hovering. I could only hear her before, but now I can see her as well. She was clad in flowing white light, and everything about her was white light. Hair, face, hands, gown, everything. No, she said. But they don't love me, I said. I would have loved to have loved someday, she admitted, adding, I would have loved to have loved sometime. I inquired as to when. She stated that it would not be for some time. I knew I wouldn't be able to grow up without it. I knew I wouldn't be able to have it until I started my own family. She promised me a lot of love then. I inquired as to where I could locate it. She indicated the town. She had vanished. I continued on my way home. That was the night, I believe. I'm not certain. I lay in bed, reading my storybooks. I knew as I turned the page to the old woman who lived in a shoe that one day I'd have a lot of kids' beds lined up like that. I had the impression that I had been shown a promise, a look into my future. On Christmas morning, almost 40 years later, I stood back and admired our 7 adopted girls' gifts, new canopy beds, all lined up in one spacious new room, and I had a flashback to being 5 and peering deeply into that storybook page. These are only a few of the events that occurred following the drowning. I once witnessed a spirit climb out of me and leave through the window to play. I once sang "Jesus Loves Me" so loudly in Sunday school that the youngsters shielded their ears. I was coloring a picture of children waiting in line to sit on Jesus' knee, and I felt like I was the next one in line, waiting my time. It felt real. I felt like I was in 2 universes at the same time. I once awoke from a slumber to see 3 individuals dressed as if they were from 100 years ago standing by my bed, and the following time Dad brought us fishing. I wandered out into the woods in a daydream and spotted a wildflower growing out from under a rock. That flower took my breath away. Despite its dry, cracked surroundings, it was freely dancing in the wind. It told my fortune in the same way that the angel did, not in words, but as an example. I imagined girls at school wearing gorgeous dresses, long hair with bows, and wearing elegant shoes and socks. Then there was me, with my poor, skinny, pixie haircut and hand-me-downs all the way down to my socks and underpants. I imagined fancy flowers at flower shops, similar to those expensive girls. But this wildflower reminded me of myself. All it takes is to feel grateful to be alive. It does not require affection or care. It is strong and dances to demonstrate its ability to survive on its own. It gave me the impression that I would be all right, no matter what people did to me. Someday I'll dance in the wind to celebrate my survival victory. I was reminded of this when I was 35, going through a divorce after 16 years of marriage, since I had danced for around 6 hours straight on the river bank one night. Despite the fact that there were a lot of people there, I danced alone in my bare feet. I rejoiced at my win. I'd been through hell my entire life, but I was still alive. I didn't care what other people thought. I was there through it all. Throughout my childhood, I was abused in every way. I was hated, knocked out cold, and laughed at. My husband and his family were almost as horrible to me, but I had just prayed to God and asked him why. "My child," he replied. My sorrowful emotions suddenly turned to joyous tears as I understood God was reminding me that I am his kid, his family. I realized I didn't need anyone else. I had 3 sons who adored me, and God was always there for me. I died from a tubal pregnancy at the age of 25, passed through the tunnel into the light, and asked God to allow me back to raise my 3 boys. What the heck was that? I thought to myself as soon as I wake up. I forced myself to forget, like I had done with everything else that had ever happened to me. You have no one to inform when no one cares about you. I didn't tell anyone at first. Then one night, as I sat alone looking up at the sky, the drowning flashed back to me like a movie trailer. I went to my mother, then Terry, then John, and inquired if I had drowned when I was a child. They'd completely forgotten about it, but in fact, I did. My mother stated she knew my father and his family would blame her, just as they had after Junior died. Her first child died after 9 months of illness. Then I was only concerned with the facts. How did they track me down? What did they recall? They had no idea how they found me. Mom believes she told John to go where he last saw me, and he felt around under there until he felt me. All John knows is that he got in a lot of trouble that day because of me, like he always does. The flashbacks began at this point. They terrified me. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I knew they were true, so I began to speak. I began writing my PTSD memories from my childhood trauma 20 years later, attempting to capture them in the pages. I went through multiple notebooks. I got up the next day and reread it after I finished. This is when I observed tiny pinpoints of light dispersed throughout the filth, trauma, and abuse. The drowning, the after effects, spiritually transformational experiences, and bonding with nature. I couldn't figure it out. I had out-of-body experiences and after-death contact before I realized what any of these terms meant. Study and the internet have all assisted me in understanding and putting words to what I thought was just me and my weird, incomprehensible crazy. My PTSD and anxiety from abuse were alleviated, though, after I started telling people. My NDE helped me overcome my PTSD. I've learned that God and the angels are always present when I need them. I must constantly trust my instincts, listen and I will listen, and let love triumph over wrath. I preach when I am driven to do so, which leads to love. I value miracles as they occur now and do not ignore them. The most recent was in January. In her kitchen, I testified to my stepdaughter and mother-in-law, and a circle of light surrounded us the entire time. They had also witnessed it. We all felt as if we were in a hallowed area. We discussed it later, and it was strange to hear them describe what I felt and saw as if I were telling them myself. I could go on and on about the miracles I've seen. I am not unique. I've only been on the other side of the fence twice, and God wants us to bear witness to His love. How awful would it be if I didn't do it because I was afraid of being mocked? I owe Him a lot. People can label me a liar, insane, a stupid, or an idiot, or they can say I'm simply looking for attention. I'm thanking God. That's it. I shall do so until my last breath.